Hi, and welcome to this tutorial. I'm your professor, Dr. English Dowdell. Now, in this video, we're going to walk through a Jetpack Compose project step by step so you can see exactly how to build in Android Studio. Now, what we're going to do is from the Practice Compose basic tutorial, we're building one screen that's using Jetpack Compose. And the goal here is really to learn how Compose lays out the user interface, image on top, then a title, then a paragraph. And we'll use resources for text and images and a column to stack everything vertically. So before we get started, make sure that you go scroll down, and these are the resources we're going to be using. We're going to be copying this text to be used later. But for now, what I want you to do is go in here and I want you to download this image because you're going to be using that image in a little bit with doing your layout. And then once you do that, then go ahead and open your Android Studio so that we can start creating this project. Now this is the image that we're going to download. So we're just going to click on download, and we're going to download it to a place that we can grab it on our local system. Now, if you already had a project open, then go ahead and close that project so it takes you back to this screen so that we can go ahead and create a new project. So we're going to go to New Project. And we're going to be using, for this practice, we're going to be using the empty activity template. And then for the name, let's call this Compose Article. Okay, and we'll accept all of the defaults that it provides. And let's go ahead and click on Finish. Now it's going to take a little while, just like every other, because it's building the Cradle here. So we want to go ahead and just allow it to do that. So once it's done that, then we can continue working. Okay, so once your Cradle has finished syncing, then what you should be seeing is this main activity .kt tab here. And if you see that, then you're in the right place. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to import that image that we downloaded into the drawable folder. Now, keep in mind, Android is very picky about file names, so just remember to always have lowercase and underscores, if you need them. So what I want you to do is go where you downloaded that file, and I want you to copy, copy that file. Okay, so I've copied mine to my clipboard. So we're going to go and um, get what we need to the location where we need to paste it. So make sure up at the top here, instead of Android, we want project because we're working in the project mode right now. Okay, and so we're going to click on apps. We're going to expand that. We're going to expand source. We're going to expand main, and where we want to be is in the resource folder, and then we're going to put under drawables. So I'm going to right click under drawables, and I'm going to say that I want to paste that document, and this is the image, rather the file that I had from my download folder. So I'm adding it here, and again, just make sure that your name, it's saying bg underscore compose underscore background.png, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And as you can see, it's added here. So if you can see it listed, under your drawable in that folder, then you're good. Okay. So in Android, we store text in the string XML file. Okay, and it keeps code clean, and supports translation later. So what we want to do is we're going to open up still within our resources folder here, but we're going to go under values. Okay, and what we're looking for is the strings.xml. So I'm going to double click on that so that I can bring that up. And then I'm going to add inside of here um, some resources, which are the strings that we saw in the earlier document that we were in. So, you know, this text here, this is what I'm going to be adding in. And when I add these strings in, I need to give them a name so that I can just basically call them some kind of unique name. So I can say, okay, I want to call this string, I want to call this string, I want to call this string. You know, so I'm going to give them some unique names. Remember, naming is lowercase, underscores, no spaces, and things like that. And then for the value, or for the for the value of the content of those string resources, I'm going to actually include this information. So let me copy the first one first. Okay, and I'm going to come back over here to Android. Okay, and this is going to be string. And like I said, I'm going to give it a unique name, which is going to be compose short description. Okay. Well, you know what? Let's do the title. That's what I copied first. So let's do that one first instead of the description. So let's say title Jetpack Compose tutorial. Okay. And then the content, and this probably looks really familiar, especially if you've worked with HTML before. And I'm going to paste that in there. Okay, so what happens is when I call, you know, this name or where I place that, it's going to populate that. Okay, so now let's go to the next one. So the next one was this kind of short description here. So I'm going to copy that. Okay, and let's say string name equals, and we're going to call this, that was that compose short description. And I'm going to paste that in there. And then that long description, I want to grab that. And again, the reason why we do this instead of just typing directly into our you know, our screens, because we can, you know, modify it using this XML file, or we can even do translations using the XML file. Okay, this one, what is it doing? Okay. And string. Okay, so that's all pasted in there. So if you need to pause this video to take a look at this, but these are the resource strings that we're going to be using. Now, if you don't see any error messages, any red errors, then you're good. If you do, it's usually because maybe the apostrophes, you know, it perhaps maybe you might have an apostrophe within the string. Like here, we have an apostrophe, and like in HTML, you know, sometimes it doesn't read it as an apostrophe. You have to put like maybe, you know, some kind of code in there. So for Kotlin for Android, for this Android Studio, what we have to do is we have to put the slash in there so that we can tell it, okay, we want to read this as an apostrophe. You know, we don't want it to try to translate it or interpret it as apostrophe. We want to actually print it out as an apostrophe. Okay. All right, so let's go back to our main. Now we're gonna build our UI in layers. Okay, remember main activity, this is what hosts the screen. Okay, and then we call a screen composable. Okay, and then we'll build a reusable card composable. Okay, so everybody right now, you should be looking at this this main activity.kt screen. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a we're going to create another screen. Okay, we're going to create a screen, a composable. Um, and this is going to be our screen level composable. And it doesn't draw the UI directly. What it does is it's going to pass data into a UI component. Um, and that's a very composite way to work. So in this screen here, I mean, in this file here, we're going to add a composable. We're going to add the compose article app. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and type that out, and then you can either, you know, stop the video so that you can type it as well. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with at composable, and the function is called compose article app. Okay, and in this we have an article card. Okay, now we'll talk about this in a little bit. We're going to actually build a composable called article card. You know what? Let's go ahead and build the article card first. Okay. Um, okay, and then we can then it'll make more sense as far as what we're actually feeding as far as the data within our compose article app. So let's build the article card first. Okay, and within this article card, what we want to do is we're going to build, this is going to be our layout of our card. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's build that layout first. And if you look at the practice compose, if you go to the solutions code, it does provide, if we go back, let's see, where is it? Oh, here. If you go to the solutions code, it provides as far as like the layout that you would use and kind of gives you the instructions. But so I'm going to copy this so that I don't have to kind of retype it. And I'm going to place this inside of that. Now don't worry about the reds. We'll deal with those later. Okay, so that I don't have to type it. So first thing is my column. When we do a column, we're going to have modifier equals modifier so that we can feed some data inside of there. Okay, and then for the image, we're going to say painter equals image painter content description equals null. Okay, and then for our text, we're going to say text equals title, modifier equals modifier padding, which is 16, and then font size SP. Okay. And then for the text below this, this is where we're going to have sort of our long description. So text is going to equal the long description. Modifier equals modifier and then text text align equals text align, and we're going to justify that. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and first of all, let's handle some of these things that we have in red here. So for modifier, we need to import this foundations. Okay, so that's what it's asking us to do for that one. And usually it allows you, sometimes it gets a little finicky. Okay, so there we go. More actions. So we don't have, let me see, maybe I spelled this wrong, modifier. That's correct. So let's do the import. So I'm going to go ahead under here and I'm going to do that import foundations because it should have just allowed me to do that. Okay. I think the reason why, and it's good that we're kind of talking out loud. The reason why I believe it's giving me an error message here because I haven't really fed in any parameters into this column. So let me go ahead and do that. Not to the column, but I mean to the article card. So it's looking for the modifier here, and it's, basically it doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and do that. And again, like I said, working with code, I don't expect you to memorize it. It can be a little overwhelming and complex at first, and sometimes we just have to kind of think out some of the issues that we have. And if you run into any issues, please feel free to contact me. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to be feeding in the string, the title. Okay, so that's going to, suffice as far as this. We're going to be feeding in, of course, the short description. We're going to be feeding in a long description. We're going to be feeding in an image painter, and then we're going to be feeding in that modifier. And notice now, modifier is no longer red. And then for our images, like I said, I went ahead and imported in the foundation image so it doesn't give me an error message when it comes to that. And we've still got a few, but that's okay because we haven't completed, our information yet here. Okay. And I've got title, equals string. I'm just making sure that I have everything that I need for this. What I also notice is that I'm missing my my short description as well. So I need to have that short description in there. So that's going to be text equals short description, modifier equals, okay, we'll go ahead and accept that. And then text align, we want it to be justified as well. Okay. And I think I'm missing something here. That's why it's giving me this error message here. Oh, you know what? Font size here. That's not supposed to be there. Let's see, what else am I missing? Okay, so I've got the description, the content description, I've got the title, modifier, 16 dp, font size, okay, and I'm loading that. I've got text, short description, modifier, or padding, start. Okay. And then I've got the justifiable there, and I don't want that. I know for a fact. Okay, long description. Okay, look at here, I misspelled. Okay, and then that fixed that. So I'm going to tell you, coding, I've been coding for a long time, and sometimes it's just something small, like a typo, period put in the wrong place, missing, you know, parentheses, commas, things like that. It's really easy. So sometimes you just have to, first of all, you have to kind of take your time when you're typing. And second of all, just kind of look through and just see where the mistake is. Sometimes the UI, the interface doesn't always tell you like what's exactly wrong. Like it didn't really tell us exactly what was wrong, but we had to kind of figure it out. Okay, so now that we have this this article card in place, so now let's go ahead and let's call this article card within our Compose article app, our composable article app. Okay, so we're gonna, within that curly bracket, we're gonna call article card. And then here is where we're going to feed it all of like sort of the parameters that it's asking for here within that function. So I'll go ahead and accept that one. So basically string resource. So what we're going to do for the card is first we're going to show as far as if we look back here, we want to show this text. Okay, so that's what we're calling that. Okay, then the next line that we want is we want the short description. And when we call the short description, it's going to be from this reference here. Okay. And then we want to call the long description. Okay, that's going to be from that reference here. Okay, and then we're going to have as far as the image painter, and we're going to be using the image painter from, remember where we placed, remember here, we placed the in the drawable, okay, and so that's what we're telling it to pull that information. Okay, all right. So, you know, if again, as we started typing, if it kind of automatically imports as far as, you know, the information, then we know that we're on track, okay? All right, so now we've created our composable is, the function is this compose article app, okay? And what we're doing is calling this private function, okay, that we've built as far as the card. We've kind of done the layout of the card, okay? And use the column in the card to make all of the children vertical, okay, so that it stacks like from top to bottom, okay? All right, so we should see, again, see all of this information. Okay, so now what we have to do is we need to connect it to our main composable screen. You know, we've got to, this is our main composable screen, so we've got to connect it to the activity here. And so in the create, we want to make sure that the scaffold is calling it. Right now it's calling that greeting. We're not using that greeting anymore. That's like by default. But what we want it to do is we want it to actually call as far as the Compose article app. So let's go ahead and replace this. Instead of calling greeting, we want it to call compose. We want it to compose article app. Okay, And I wanted to do that because I wanted you to see this error here. So if we were using a lot of like earlier versions, instead of a scaffold, they were using a surface, okay? And with the surface, you know, just placing as far as the function, would have been fine. Um, but since we're using a scaffold instead of a surface, we see this error here. And this is because in using a scaffold, Android gives us an inner padding value. And so what we need to do is we need to apply that to our screen with a modifier so that our content doesn't get hidden by the scaffold layout elements. Okay, so the way that we fix this here is a couple of ways. One is within our actual Compose article app, we need to include um, a modifier. And I have information in the course room. If you're watching this and you're part of my course, I have information about all of this within the course room, when you use a scaffold as opposed to surface. So make sure that you take a look at that. But what we have to do is we have to add um, modifier, okay, colon modifier equals modifier. Okay, so within that, the actual composable that we're calling, and then we have to add this so that it passes what it needs to pass within the function. So we'll say I always want to spell it wrong. So we're saying modifier equals, and then basically that inner padding, okay? And see, now we've fixed that issue there, okay? All right, so if you want to take a look, again, if you want to preview this, um, we need to call this function down here in the preview. And we're not adding the modifiers or anything like that, with that, because all we're doing is just previewing. Preview is like a supercharge and compose. It lets you actually see the UI without actually running the app. So again, this is how we're going to actually see it. So in order to be able to see our preview, remember we need to have that split screen. Okay, and we have to build and refresh. And sometimes we have issues with this, like we're experiencing an issue now with this. So there's a few things that we can actually do in order to deal with this. So one of the things that I do is I'll go up here to build, and I'll do a clean project and allow it to kind of clean the project and see if that works. Okay, that's not working. Okay, let's go from here to sometimes bouncing around. Okay, the other thing that I do is I may do like an invalidate caches and then do a restart. So this may take a minute to do that, but under File, I'm going to go invalidate caches and ask it to restart. And again, I'm going to have to wait until everything loads so that I can try it again. Okay, so once you do that, then go ahead and click on the preview, and then you're going to wait for the build to finish. And then once it finishes, you should be able to see your preview. sometimes Android Studio stores temporary files called caches, to make things run a little faster. But occasionally those cache files become outdated or out of sync with your project, especially after you add new code or resources or dependencies. So when this happens, features like preview, might stop working correctly or it might get stuck or something like that. So using that invalid caches and the restart kind of clears those temporary files and lets Android Studio rebuild everything fresh. Um, so hopefully it loads this time. A lot of times what I do is I'll go ahead and have that preview, have that split screen already. As soon as I start the project, I have that split screen so that it kind of stays in sync with each other. But again, it's going to take a little while to build, so let's wait for that. So one way you can kind of think about it is like, when your phone app glitches, and then you have to restart it, you're not fixing the app, you're just kind of resetting the environment that it runs in. So that's basically just really what we're doing here. Okay, one other thing I noticed that I did wrong here, and again, like I said, I kind of like the idea of making a few mistakes, is let me correct something that we had. So we had the app preview here. And then this was supposed to be compose article app. So if, again, it's showing the old preview. It's rendering the old preview. And so what I needed to do was to change that. So in your preview code, make sure that you have the correct. I actually placed the compose article app, calling it as the function name instead of the actual app. Okay, and you can, if you wanted to see it on one page, we can kind of do like the zoom out so that you can be able to see it a lot better. But as you can see with the article we've got the image, we've got the name here, we've got the short description, and then we've got our long description. So basically what you want to do is just kind of compare it, to as far as the requirements, and make sure that you have everything there as the requirements. And so if we look at this column, remember how our column was? So we've had the image, at the top, and then we had that title, which is here. We've had the text, which is here, and we had that's the long description, and then we had the short description, I'm sorry, and then we had the long description. So again, you're just validate this against as far as the UI spec. If your text isn't justified, then one of the things that you can check is to make sure that you have it justified on both the descriptions on both of these paragraphs. Now, some of the things that you can look at, if maybe your image isn't resolving, maybe the name that you have is not matching. So remember, we have to make sure that that name matches. This name, I'm sorry, the name here matches exactly what we had in our drawable. Again, if we've got like maybe some error messages here, just make sure that you're putting that slash in front of the apostrophe. And then, just make sure again that you're calling, unlike I did, make sure that you're calling, your functions and things like that. Now we can also look at this within as far as the if you wanted to look at it, the emulator, you would just go ahead and just hit run app, and you would be able to take a look at it in the emulator. But because this is so static, we can basically kind of see it here in our preview that it comes out good. Okay, just so you can see it, this is it in the emulator. Okay. It may take, when you run your emulator, it may take a while for the first time to be able to run, because it has to sync with the Cradle and things like that. But I did want you to see what it looked like in the actual emulator. Okay, so today we practice three things. We practice column layout, padding, and using resources, both text resources as well as image resources. Um, Compose is declarative. We describe what the UI should look like, and then Compose renders it. Okay. Um, so we'll be using a lot of what you learned in this practice if you did this practice along with me. When we start building as far as your app interface. Okay, so that's it for this walkthrough. Again, make sure that you're building this again on your own. That's where really again the learning is going to happen. And if you get stuck, just kind of go back and rewatch that section, and work through it step by step. As you can see, just like any other programming language, it's very particular, lowercase, spellings, things like that, commas, parentheses, so, small things like that do matter. So you have to kind of take your time with it. And then when you're troubleshooting, you just gotta, like what we did, is just gotta go through everything and see where you possibly may have typed something wrong or whatever the case is. But other than that, happy coding, and I'll see you in the next video.